Peace, peace. Power is definitely black, families. How everybody doing? Kawafi here. Jiambo. Assalamu alaikum to all my brothers and sisters, the kings and queens. Hope everybody is doing okay out there. What we're here to talk about today is modern day slaves. How you are a slave, why you are a slave, and everything in the ins and outs of it. First thing we need to talk about is that we are still slaves. If you have a 9 to 5, um, if you are contributing a large percent of time of your life towards a company, a business that's not yours, a dream that's not yours, um, then you are a slave. Most of us spend 40 plus hours, may could be give or less, 40 plus hours, um, to these companies, and we miss out on our families, we miss out on important things in our life, and we do not chase our goals and our dreams in life, which make us very miserable, and we inflict this against our family and loved ones. So most of us work for $1 million companies, and like I say, we work these 40 plus hours, and we most of us make minimum wage. Now, if you're blessed enough to make um, 12, 13, 14, $15 an hour, then that's great. But most of us make minimum wage, and we're working on the plantation. So um, we're working for these million dollar companies, and the money that you make them, you're not even getting nowhere near half of the type of money that you're making for the company. So you're exactly a slave. So once we come to terms with us being slaves, once you understand you're a slave, then you can uh, adjust your life correctly. Now, the next thing we have to understand is freedom. Um, None of us is free. And what I mean by that is it's four major things. It's way many. Um, it's way more than four, but it is four major things to get over as far as proving to you that you are not free. Most of us think because we live in America, quote unquote, the best country in the world, that you are free, but you cannot collect rainwater. That I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if it's a federal charge or not, but you cannot collect rainwater. You cannot build a house. You cannot go out and find land that's not being used and build a house. Um, the government will intervene. You cannot go off the grid. In so many other words, the government will intervene. You cannot get married without the government's consent, and you cannot have um, a child without the government trying to um, intersect. Or you cannot have a child at home, have a midwife, and et cetera, and homeschool this child and never put it in a system without the government raising questions, trying to poke their nose in the businesses. So you're not free whatsoever. You cannot collect your own water. This is from nature. You cannot collect your own water. You cannot build your own shelter on land. You cannot marry who you want to marry. By you have to have laws to marry them, and you cannot have children without the so-called government intervening. So with those four things, to me, I don't feel or see how you feel that you're free. So once we get past that, we have to understand why. We have to understand what's really going on with it. Now, many of us, we're not going to believe that we're slaves, and I will. The reason why I say that is because of a certain case. Along this topic, I always end up here on this case. So the cat Sam A. Cartwright, he was a physician in Mississippi and Louisiana. I believe that he was maybe born in Pennsylvania. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he was definitely a physician in Mississippi and Louisiana in 1850 and 1851, one of the two. Now, this man was mainly known for a disorder or mental disease called Drapetomania. Um, I'm sorry, Drapetomania. Sorry, I was thinking about something else. Drapetomania was so-called discovered by Sam A. Cartwright, and it was a mental disease that so-called made slaves um, escape from captivity. It was a mental disease that made slaves want to escape from the forceful labor that they were made and threatened to do. So we have to understand how this is how these white supremacists get down. Now, Sam A. Cartwright, he wrote a little bit under 10 books, but he was mainly known for these false disorders. I believe it was debunked later and ruled as a scientific racism, is what he was involved in. Now, understand how these racists work. These racists worked both sides of the fence. He was also under Dr. Rush in Philadelphia as an abolitionist against slavery, but at the same time, when he was amongst his Southern brothers, he preached and practiced pro-slavery and was against the Illinois people of America. So later on with Drapetomania, as I say, it was debunked, but it was a mental disease that was classified in the scientific and medical field at a point in time. Now, along with this is eleutheromania. Eleutheromania was another disorder and mental illness that he had so-called discovered that it was a craving for freedom. That was the mental illness that it gave you was a craving for freedom. So picture what type of white supremacist people we were dealing with to actually label this a type of disorder for people of captivity all over the world. Um, it was another. Now, both of these disorder and mental illnesses is both linked with um, dysesthesia. Dysesthesia is another one, a so-called mental illness that is responsible to make you lazy. It's responsible for laziness. Now, pause for a second. What slave do you know is lazy? It's only when we didn't want to be um, forcefully to participate in forceful servitude. So we have to be very careful when we are dealing with these white supremacist systematic ways and these illnesses in these different ways that we are dealing with is still alive and moving now. That's that type of mindset. Like I say, these disorders have got debunked, but the mindsets and these white supremacists play both sides of the field. So it's very hard to determine who is for us and who is not. Um, so we have to also understand that Sam A. Cartwright um, was very, very racist. I believe I have one of his quotes right here. I have a mountain full of quotes. So if you ever hear me just pull quotes up in here, it's because I have a whole clipboard full of them. Um, care. Now this is a quote from Sam Cartwright. Care, kindness, attention, and humanity to prevent and cure from running away. See, they actually believed that this was a disease. They actually believed that this was a disorder and that it needed to be cured. And I guess, they were trying to find, um, and publicly, they were trying to find softer ways to deal with runaway slaves, I guess, but still. Now, peep, this is another quote. If they nonetheless became dissatisfied with their condition, they should be whipped as a prevention against running away. This is exactly a contradiction to the whole curing process. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we have to understand what type of white supremacists we are dealing with here. Now, when Cartwright was asked about slavery, and Cartwright um, replied passages of Christian scriptures about dealing with slavery. So we have to understand that every systematic thing that we're dealing with um, have been placed in the way of keeping you a slave. And this is not only 100% a race thing now; it's more of a poverty, rich versus poor thing, but we can't forget that it was systematically and strategically orchestrated and originated to combat the spiritual, the mental, and the physical, and